Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Y'all Pod Podcast number 1. This week we'll be reviewing nonfiction titles. And the first title that I'd like to cover with you this week is called Enchanted Air. It's Two Cultures, Two Wings. It is a nonfiction award-winning memoir written by a Cuban-American author named Margarita Engel. It's also illustrated by Ido Rodriguez. Enchanted Air was first published in 2015 by Simon & Schuster and was a winner of the Pura Beaupre Author Award Prize. It was also a YALSA nonfiction finalist, as well as it was also named a Walter Dean Award honoree. Now, before we get into the meat and potatoes of this story, let's start by reviewing the cover art. The front cover was designed using light pastel colors, and it sort of adds to the light ambiance of the look of the story and of the book. There's a white pigeon on the front cover, along with the face of a young girl that one could assume to be the young character in the book, Margarita. There's clouds in the background, and the handwriting on the front, or the script, supports that of Enchanted Air. It's very light and flowing. Overall, it's a really, really pretty book. The story of Enchanted Air is a poetic memoir of the author Margarita, where she tells the story of growing up during the Cold War, 1950s and 1960s. She describes herself as a child of two countries. The story is actually written in verse, and it takes place between Cuba and Los Angeles, California. Very different places from today. However, people can see themselves within the story as Margarita describes a beautifully green island that is a very different place from Los Angeles, where she happens to spend most of her childhood. To young Margarita, these two places could not be more different, and Cuba seems to be a distant paradise that gets farther and farther away as time goes by. As the story progresses, she seems to spend more time dreaming about Cuba than taking into account the fact that she lives in Los Angeles, and she tries to compare the two places together. And through the main eyes of the character Margarita, we start to see that she really longs for this place. And the book is very haunting, and in the manner that it takes place in the 1950s and the 1960s, and that's very different than today. However, it's just as applicable. One reader called the book a poignant memoir written in verse that happens to wonderfully describe the angst of growing up and feeling torn between two countries. While another person actually describes the book as like a history lesson, wanting to go to Cuba and to visit it. And it's obvious that this book can be definitely recommended and enjoyed by others, because it's obviously a story that Margarita tells from her heart. One of the things in the book that I love the most is when she reminisces about another main character, her great-great-grandmother, and the garden that she grows in Cuba. Now she says, Margarita does, with tangled green growth all around her, La Mama de Abuelta works as hard as any farmer, growing bananas and papayas and sweet potatoes and lime. She can grow any food, and she smiles at my jokes, even the rugged ones told by men. She's been alive for more than 90 years. Throughout the book, Margarita speaks of her great-grandmother and other family members in Cuba. However, once you read the book, you start to understand that Los Angeles is a very different place from Cuba. Overall, the book can be described in a single word. It's pretty wonderful. Author Margarita Engel has told the story of her childhood in a memoir as a wonderful story in the form of poems that really helps the reader to better imagine and understand the differences of childhood and growing up between two very diverse and different places. Overall, Enchanted Air is highly recommended, and it's award-winning, and it should be enjoyed by all. It is available as paperback form online for $7.49 from most online booksellers, and it's also available as an ebook production. However, I've not actually found an audiobook production of it. I would also like to take a moment to hear from one of our valued sponsors here at our podcast. It's really important to help us to pay our bills. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, we have bills. So, when you have trouble deciding upon new books for your collection each month, are your patrons or students asking you for titles, and you don't want to have to spend a great deal of time Googling each novel? Well, if you answered yes, I would certainly suggest that you go visit Goodreads.com. That's right, www.goodreads.com is a one-stop shop destination for all things YAL. This month's homepage features the best books of 2020 and award winners in 9 separate categories and genres, and that's including YAL. However, these award-winning novels were actually voted for by Goodreads members, so that's a little bit different than just reviews. They're actually voted for. When you visit the store, please make sure that you mention YALPOD during your registration, and this way they'll know that we sent you. Again, that helps us to pay the bills. All right, now back to YALPOD. The next book that we're going to talk about today is a nonfiction memoir written by a young author, Martin Pistorius, along with Megan Lloyd Davies. This book is called Ghost Boy. I first heard about the story of Martin while watching a medical documentary online, and I heard about what took place with young Martin. I was truly taken aback by this nonfiction title, and I highly recommend it. Ghost Boy is actually a New York Times bestseller, was published in 2013 by Nelson Books, which is an imprint of Thomas Nelson Books, and it's a story of young Martin Pistorius who, in the year of 1975, living in Johannesburg, South Africa, he comes down with a mysterious illness. I will not go too far into his illness, but I will suffice to say that it totally changes his life and requires him to be totally dependent upon 24-hour skilled nursing care. When you read this book, you really start to understand how his illness, Martin's illness, changes the life of his parents and his siblings. And they're mentioned throughout the book, and then you actually start to feel for them. You feel for Martin, because when he first loses his voice and then slowly his whole body starts to shut down, as you read the book, you come to understand that how the doctors were actually at a loss for the diagnosis of this illness. And as the story progresses, Martin actually becomes locked within his own body. Ghost Boy tells of his experiences throughout his life, and as he watches those around him act as that he doesn't exist. As I mentioned earlier, the story takes place in Johannesburg, South Africa, which was given a modern city in 1975, but you might not think that they have the medical care and therapy that young Martin would actually need. However, there's a surprising twist to the story that gives new meaning to being in the right place at the right time. If we look at the cover art of Ghost Boy, you'll see that it is written with a really, really interesting looking title. The title is written with black crown, and there's a face of a boy sort of drifting off into the background that you can't really see. Readers of this book have actually stated that it's a deeply affectioning and at times shocking book. And very honestly, that only a reader of Ghost Boy could truly understand what young Pistorius goes through. And that another book called The Diving Bell and the Butterfly is just as applicable. It's another story I would really, really strongly recommend to y'all. The last thing that we're going to talk about today, besides Ghost Boy and Enchanted Air, again, 2 great novels, is the story of Code Talker. Now, Code Talker is a fictionalized account of a non-fiction story of the Code Talkers of World War II, published by Penguin Group in 2005. It covers the Marine Navajo Code Talkers who fought in the Pacific Theater during World War II. The truth behind the nonfiction account of Windtalkers was a story that was kept secret for over 20 years following the war. And in the beginning of the story, young Ned Beatty, he's 16 years old, he lies about his age to enlist in the United States Marine because he has a desire to become a code talker. Now, how he knew about it, that doesn't really come up. As a member of the Native American Navajo tribe, Ned goes through great ordeals to try to serve his country and to become a Windtalker. The book starts with his enlistment and going through boot camp, and then lastly, he and his fellow soldiers training an eventual arrival in the Pacific Theater. During this story, you're going to see and you're going to find out how the Windtalkers help to give away the fact that the Marines, using the Navajo language as a pseudocode for the Empire of Japan, was never able to break it for the entire duration of the war, which was very incredible. It's just an incredible story, and when you look at the cover art, you'll see that it's black, dark, and there's 2 silver GI dog tags. printed with the name Joseph Bruchac, which is our author, as well as the name of the book, which is Code Talker. Once Ned actually tries to achieve his goals and he becomes a wind talker, he goes through intensive training. And then he and his GI soldiers end up fighting in the Battle of Bougainville, Pavuvu, Iwo Jima, Suribachi, and on to Okinawa. Towards the end of the story, he and his fellow soldiers, having fought in 5 major battles and having lost countless friends, they prepare for the mainland invasion of Japan. However, unfortunately, and fortunately, the dropping of the bottle of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the Japanese do finally surrender, and Ned makes his way back home, but he has to keep all secrets of his military service a secret. While I'm not going to reveal any more that takes place in this great book, I would certainly say that it is one worth reading. The School Liberty Journal states that Code Talker is a nonsensical and accurate portrayal of a story that is quite inspiring. Young adults can find this book. It is available online for most booksellers for $8.99. I've not seen a ebook production of it or an audiobook production of it. However, using Navajo code, we will send off today saying Te a koktik ha. That is all. So this evening we've reviewed 3 wonderful titles: Enchanted Air, Two Cultures; Ghost Boy, a memoir of a misdiagnosed boy by Megan Lloyd Davies and Martin Pistorius, as well as Code Talker, a fictionalized account of the true story of a Navajo Marine by author Joseph Bruchac. Each of these books is a wonderful story, and I would certainly recommend you read them, no matter what your decision. So again, we'd like to thank you for listening to this month's episode of Y'all Pod, and I look forward to next month's podcast, where we will discuss 3 new episodes and go deeper into the topic of young adult literature. Until then, take care.